I have finally managed to get my hands on F124, and today we're going to be going over the hottest talking point behind the scenes, and that's the massively overhauled handling. Before we get started, it's important to note that although we're less than a week out from public release, this is still technically a preview build. So this is not a review, and I should say thank you to EA for allowing me access and to give you guys my first impressions. With all that said, let's get into it. Now, there's no easy way to say this, but my impressions of the handling of the game so far are that it's a big step in the wrong direction. I've even written the words unmitigated disaster in my notes, and I don't even think that's overdramatic. Now, I know what you're thinking straight away. You're skeptical of my opinion. And I don't blame you, but keep watching and you'll find not only my reasons, but detailed tests, reasons we got here, and even similar opinions from virtually every fellow F1 content creator in the community. I should say all of this primarily applies to playing on a wheel. Pad is different, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So what's so bad about it? Well, it feels like they've taken a big step into being much more arcadey this year, and that's coming from someone who doesn't think the game should go full sim. It really feels like it's been built on the pad and then ported to a wheel, which I'm sure you can imagine is never going to go well. To be more specific, one of the biggest issues is the incredibly pointy front end on the car this year. I'm talking full-on physics-busting levels of turning that make the car feel so incredibly sharp that it's hard to drive. Now, the steering rack has been updated this year, so it requires you to put the max steering rotation on your wheel to something like 400 to 500 degrees. Although that does help calm it down, it doesn't change the fact that the front end is just insane. You can really feel that when you go to catch a slide. Look how much the front end darts around when you countersteer. But what's weird is there's still chronic understeer in the car. It just turns in incredibly sharply, then understeers when it gets there. What's more, the rear end is super reluctant to slide now. So much so that you can even run Monaco levels of front wing with Monza levels of rear wing. Now, it's not easy to drive, but fundamentally it's possible to get around a lap with reasonable pace. Insane. Another big issue is that you can now absolutely fly over curbs that you just shouldn't be able to take. Now, I'm only allowed to show you Imola in career mode, so this is career mode practice, but look how much curb you can take at turns 1 to 2 now. When was the last time you saw an F1 car fly over big sausage curbs like that? Last year, you'd bottom out and lose loads of time if you tried this, but this year, it's possible again. It's strange because the suspension itself now reacts more to curbs, but the car just refuses to bottom out in any significant way, which allows you to take super unrealistic amounts of curb. You can go absolutely full lock through the corners now, and it's fast. I will tell if this will become the meta or not, but there should not be anywhere near this much grip when the tyre is so heavily overloaded, and this must be making a difference in other aspects of the handling too. The wet tyres are just completely useless now. The Inters are capable of going the exact same speed as the full wet tyres, even in heavy rain conditions. The force feedback feels less detailed than last year and is still very much linked to frame rate, and as of right now, a lot of direct drive wheels don't even work with the game properly. In general then, the nice feeling of last year's game is now gone. All the nuance and feeling is gone, replaced with this janky handling model that feels bad in all conditions and even worse when you get the car on the limit. It's important to say that not everyone hates the new handling, but from what I've seen, it seems to be the more casual player that seems to be enjoying it. I've seen some first impressions from 5 F1 esports players, all of which absolutely hate it. I've also heard from over 10 other F1 creators who are also all against it. There's some quotes for you on screen, but as you can see, the responses vary from constructive criticism to absolute dismay and disbelief that this is the handling we've got this year. I have not heard from a single player who I've personally raced with that enjoys it. Not one. So does that mean that just sweats like us dislike it, but a more casual player will enjoy it more? Well, maybe, but I think as soon as you start getting anywhere near the limit, you'll start to see the severe limitations of this handling model. And who doesn't strive to be near the limit? Speaking of casual, I'm not a very good pad player, but the very second that I tried the game on the pad, things just started to make sense. That keen turn in, not a problem on a pad as your inputs are filtered. 50-0 wings, not a problem because you can never realistically run that on a pad. Going full steering lock, you simply can't go full lock on a pad. The problem, well, according to Razin, who won a Creator Series Championship on a pad, is around 1.5 seconds per lap quicker on the wheel compared to pad. So that means if you're on a pad, just don't dream of being anywhere near wheel pace this year. To me, and this is my opinion, but I wholeheartedly believe the game has been built on a pad and just made to work on a wheel. We've had several Q&As with the lead handling designer, and he's confirmed that he uses a TSPC that is bolted to his desk, but not permanently, so he only sets it up a couple of times a week. So that means that the rest of his work must be done on the pad. On the handling designer, the reason that things have changed so much this year is because the old handling designer, who worked for Codemasters from 2014, left at the start of last year. After he left, EA brought in most of the Project Cars handling team, so if you like the handling in that game, you might like the handling of F1 24. But I believe the handling is now being built by engineers, which is why they're saying it's more realistic, while previously it was built by a driver. It doesn't really matter how realistic a game is on paper if it feels so bad and ultimately unrealistic to drive. Now, although the game should feel good out of the box, I think it'd be remiss of me not to do everything I can to make it feel as good as I can so I can recommend some settings to you guys. But spoiler, it doesn't fix much. So first, here's a few clips from a lap I did around Imola with everything on default, wheel rotation, setup, everything. As you can see, I'm struggling a bit and I can tell you it feels awful. But I ended up doing high 1:15s consistently. So the first thing I tried was increasing my wheels rotation to 500 degrees, which apparently should make it feel 1-to-1 with last year. This definitely helped with making it feel less sharp, but it also felt so much less agile to get to the right steering angle, and realistically, you'll be slower if you run the rotation this high. The in-game wheel also only turns to 360 degrees, so there's a weird disconnect there. I ended up running around 400 degrees rotation, which is still too pointy, but at least it allows me to drive quickly. In theory, if you want it to feel the same as last year, you should run 40% more angle than you did on F1 23. So 360 degrees becomes 500 degrees of rotation. But as it's only the initial turn-in that feels too sharp, I tried turning up this steering linearity, which basically makes the middle of the wheel less sensitive and the edges more sensitive. Now, this did feel less sharp, but I also found it very unintuitive to drive, and I don't think anyone should get used to this. So that's the wheel set up the best I can. Now let's get onto the car setup. Now, setups this year do look largely the same, barring the addition of a new engine braking setting, but under the skin, the variables have changed quite a bit. But what I found was there's a few things that make a big difference to how the car feels, and makes it feel slightly better and most definitely faster. The first of which is the anti-roll bars. This year, these make a big difference to how the car feels. But what I also found is that the cars felt quite a bit more natural if you set these as low as you can. I've done quite a bit of testing here, and I actually think one of the key issues with the lack of natural feeling of the car comes down to the anti-roll bars. Anyway, having set those low, I was instantly a few tenths quicker. Next up is the ride height, which is more for performance than feeling. I found that you can set the rear ride height close to the minimum settings, and the rear felt grippier and better. Interestingly, you actually want the front ride height to be quite high. This helps slightly reduce the pointy turning and gives you more rear grip than front, reducing oversteer. One thing you want to ensure is that the car doesn't bottom out this year. I found ride heights actually make a bigger difference than wing level to straight line speed and cornering ability. With this, plus the anti-roll bars, I got down to 1:15.3, another few tenths quicker. Now next is a big one for feeling, camber. I think one of the reasons the game feels off is the camber. Now, unfortunately, lower is always better, so you'll want to set this as low as you can because you just get more grip when you do this. But you'll find if you set the camber high while the rear is low, the car will feel much less slidey in slow speed corners. This, to me, says there's definitely an issue here, as the car shouldn't have nearly as much bite as it does in slow speed corners. It's actually hard to control even on the default setup. But this change, combined with the previous changes, got me down to 1:15.0, around a full second quicker than my previous best lap, and the car actually feels better for it, although not as good as it could feel with a higher front camber. Just a little side note, here's some clips of me driving with a maximum 50 front wing and a minimum 0 rear wing, and as you can see, it's actually drivable. This lap is actually a few tenths slower than the regular default setup, but the fact it's only that much different has me very worried that the quick setup this year are going to be very extreme. I think it'd be really interesting to see what people come up with. Anyway, with all those tweaks, plus a few minor ones like setting the brake pressure to 100, up from the default 97 for some reason, here's the resulting lap. Does this lap look realistic to you? The laps are going to look less realistic this year, let alone feel it. What amazes me is that they're completely unapologetic. They still genuinely believe that this game is a step forward in terms of handling. I think that they think we'll just get used to it and start to like it, but how can you get used to a handling model that looks like this? I think they're underestimating how universally disliked this game will be on a wheel and how much this is going to affect their sales. Anyway, that setup seems to largely work across other tracks. It works fine on both Spa and Silverstone with minor tweaks. Now, some of the justification they gave us was that this is time trial where temperatures and wear are locked. But I tried this setup with this driving style on a 5-lap race with Spa and found that although my rear tyres were overheating, it didn't affect my pace. Not only was I significantly faster than a default setup, but my wear was also very similar. Only the rear wore more, but that actually leveled it out with the front. So this setup and driving style works, even in racing conditions. I'm sure some people smarter than me will come up with even better setups too. Now, I think it's important to provide some balance here, even though it's not a review, as it's not all bad in terms of the handling system. The tyres do seem to be improved. The temperature simulation is now much more realistic, with more realistically fluctuating surface temps, and the carcass temps are now linked much more closely to tyre energy, so no more brake dragging to warm the tyres this year. The tyre wear is also much more linked to your driving, so you'll genuinely be able to save the tyres much more than your rivals, which has never really been possible before. My only concerns with the tyres are that the AI is still locked to perfect temperatures. So on tracks where you might be struggling for temps, and in particular in changeable conditions, they could have a significant advantage over you. The drop zones of the tyre wear from F123 also seem to have been removed, which may make the undercut much less powerful now, as the tyre wear does seem to be much lower overall. Also, the ERS system has had a positive overhaul, with derating now in the game. So where previously the ERS would always deploy down the whole straight, now the ERS deploys more heavily at the start of the straight and even completely switches off at the end of the straight, which is just like real life. They have also unlocked the ERS mode in the race again, which I've got my concerns about, but I think most people will like it. The problem is the sweatier players will just be changing it 100 times per lap again. Also, the hot lap mode doesn't actually burn the entire battery, but I believe that's a bug that will be resolved before launch. Well, there you have it. That's all I've got to say on the handling of F124. I hope this video has been insightful for you and has provided enough depth for you to understand that this isn't a video that I'm making on a whim. I actually first played the game towards the end of last year, and every time I've played it, I've not really been enjoying it. When I first played it at home, I literally laughed out loud and have not been looking forward to launch this game for the first time since F1 2014. But I've been working with them to give them as much feedback as I could, which is why I've not said anything until now. This game is not only my passion, but I'm also lucky enough to call it my job, so I really do hope they see this video and can understand the full magnitude of the problem. I'm not actually expecting all reviews to be bad when they come out, because a lot of reviewers will play on a pad, but I hope at least some realise the quite fundamental issues with the handling this year, just like us regular players do. I do hope all of this can be patched out, and rest assured I will absolutely update you if it is, so make sure you subscribe. But we didn't get here by accident. There have been many conscious decisions that have led us here, so I hope something can be changed to avoid the game continuing down this route. It's a shame because I think the other changes they made this year have been a real positive step forward, but this game is fundamentally a driving game, so if the driving is bad, nothing else really matters. But thanks for watching guys, and I'll catch you next time. Bye bye.